A shape in the snow. The sky over Bozeman, Montana, was the color of ash, low, heavy clouds pressing down on the quiet town like a wool blanket soaked in sorrow. Snow fell sideways, driven by a wind that bit through layers and stung the skin like tiny needles. Most folks were still tucked in bed, heaters humming, windows sealed tight. But inside a modest white house with green shutters, an old man stood still at his kitchen window, coffee in hand, heart slowing just enough to notice something that didn't belong. Walter Green, 67, had always trusted his eyes. After 4 decades as a carpenter, he could measure wood by sight, spot a flaw in a beam from across the room. But this shape on the bench by the bus stop across the street, this didn't fit. At first glance, it looked like just another lump of snow. Maybe a bag left behind. But something about it felt wrong. Too precise. Too still. He reached for his glasses on the windowsill and squinted through the storm. That's when he saw it. A dog. No, more than that. A puppy. German Shepherd, he could tell by the shape of the ears, even though one drooped low from the weight of snow. She was curled tightly on the wooden bench, her tan and black fur barely visible through the half-zipped backpack that held her body like a forgotten schoolbook. The straps dangled against the ice-covered pavement. Her nose poked out just enough to breathe, and her eyes. God, her eyes. They weren't scared. They were waiting. Walter set the mug down. The clink of ceramic on tile sounded louder than it should. He grabbed his thick brown coat from the hook, pulled on his boots, still dusty from the firewood shed, and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a slap. No mercy in that wind. But he crossed the street anyway, slow, careful. Each step crunched like bones under his boots. The puppy didn't move. Didn't bark. Didn't even blink. She just sat there, trembling, a single living thing in a world gone silent from snow. "Hey there," Walter said softly, crouching a few feet away. His voice cracked from the cold. "What are you doing out here, sweetheart?" She didn't flinch. Only her eyes followed him. That's when he saw her pause. Red at the tips. Cracked. Bleeding from the cold. She must have been out there for hours. He looked around, nothing. No footprints. No tire marks. No one running late for the school bus. Just the wind whipping through empty trees and this small, silent creature tucked inside a child's backpack. Then he saw it. A folded scrap of paper poking from the backpack's side pocket. Walter reached out, fingers stiff with frost, and pulled it free. The handwriting was uneven. Young. "Her name is Maya. I'm sorry. Please be kind. She's good." That was it. No name. No number. No way to know who had left her, only the heartbreak in every crooked letter. She hadn't been abandoned. She'd been placed. Like someone walked her to that bench. Zipped her halfway in. Promised they'd be right back. And walked away. Still, Maya didn't move. She kept her gaze on the road, eyes wide and waiting, for a bus, a shadow, a miracle. Walter swallowed hard. He hadn't planned on this. Hell, he wasn't even sure what this was yet. But he knew one thing. You don't walk away from something that still believes someone's coming back. So he reached forward, gentle hands under the frozen backpack, and lifted her into his arms. She trembled once, then went still. Lighter than she should be. Colder than anything should ever feel. Walter turned back toward the house. The storm thickened behind him, the bench already vanishing in white. But he kept walking. One slow, deliberate step at a time. Because when a heart still waits at a bus stop, someone has to meet it halfway. First contact. Walter pushed the front door open with his shoulder, snow clinging to his coat as he stepped inside. The warmth of the house hit him like a soft exhale, radiator humming in the den, the faint scent of cinnamon still lingering from last night's tea. He shut the door gently behind him, mindful not to jostle the backpack cradled against his chest. Maya hadn't made a sound. He set the bag down beside the radiator, kneeling slowly. The puppy was still curled tightly, like she'd folded herself small enough to disappear. Her tan fur, though beautiful, was dusted with frost, and her black snout twitched slightly as the heat reached her skin. Walter unzipped the backpack all the way, pulling the flaps aside to give her space. But she didn't move. Not a single paw crossed the opening. "That's all right," he whispered, settling onto the floor a few feet away. "You don't have to rush." He stayed there, his joints aching against the hardwood, but he didn't mind. He'd done harder things. Waited longer for less. Maya's eyes never left him. She wasn't afraid. Not exactly. But there was something in her gaze that tightened his chest, like she was stuck in between what she hoped and what she no longer dared to believe. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, one paw emerged. It trembled as it landed on the floor. The second followed, cautious, testing. Her back legs remained tucked in the backpack, like she wasn't sure the ground was real. She sniffed the air. Sniffed the baseboard. Sniffed his old wool socks. Her nose touched the tip of his boot, and then snapped back like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Walter didn't move. Didn't speak. Let her lead. That's when he noticed the collar. Worn leather, faded and buckled tight around her neck. A small aluminum tag clinked as she shifted. He leaned in gently, careful not to spook her. One side of the tag was dented, but the name etched into it was still clear. Maya. He said it out loud, just above a whisper. Her ears twitched. Maya, he repeated, soft but sure. You're safe now. She didn't come closer. Didn't retreat. Instead, she curled into a half-moon shape on the floor, nose between her paws, ears angled toward him. And for the first time, she exhaled. Not in relief. But in surrender, like she was allowing herself, just barely, to believe that maybe this wasn't the end of something. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning. The note and the decision. Walter remained seated on the floor, his knees stiff, but his thoughts even heavier. The note, creased and wet around the edges, still lay on the nearby table where he'd set it down after pulling it from Maya's backpack. He turned to glance at it again. Her name is Maya. I'm sorry. Please be kind. She's good. Such simple words. But they hit like a blow to the chest. The handwriting was uneven, childish, maybe 10 or 11 years old. It wasn't sloppy, just hesitant. Like whoever wrote it had paused, again and again, trying to find the right way to say goodbye. Walter had seen his own granddaughter write like that when she was nervous about a school project, or hiding something from her mom. But this wasn't a spelling test or a forgotten homework sheet. This was a plea. Walter picked up the note again, smoothing the paper with rough fingers. The more he stared at it, the more he realized how deliberate this all was. Maya hadn't been dumped in a trash bag or tied to a fence post. She was zipped into a backpack. Warm. Facing the street. Positioned on a bench where she'd be seen. Whoever left her there had cared. Deeply. They hadn't abandoned her, they had protected her the only way they could. Still, Maya waited. That was the hardest part. Even now, lying on the floor in the heat of Walter's home, her body tense, her eyes flicked toward the front door every few seconds. Watching. Listening. Hoping. It wasn't just loyalty. It was faith. And it broke something in him. He looked at her again, at the way she curled herself so tightly it seemed she might fold into nothing. That backpack wasn't just shelter, it was memory. A container for whatever promise had been whispered to her before the person walked away. Walter stood slowly, his knees cracking as he reached for a blanket from the couch. He laid it down near the radiator, spreading it out with care. Then, he turned back to Maya and knelt beside her. "All right, girl," he murmured. "You can stay as long as you need." She didn't move. Didn't react. But when he backed away to give her space, she shifted ever so slightly, one paw sliding toward the blanket. Not a leap of trust, but a step. And that was enough. Walter folded the note once more, tucked it gently into his shirt pocket, and whispered to no one in particular. "I'm not walking away." The first night. The wind outside roared like an old train through the trees, but inside Walter's house, all was still. Maya hadn't moved from the spot near the radiator. Her body remained tense, eyes wide and locked on the front door. The backpack sat beside her like a shadow, silent, zipped open just enough for her to retreat back inside. Walter had placed the flannel blanket down a few feet away, but she hadn't touched it. Not yet. Walter watched from his recliner in the corner, nursing a second cup of tea. He didn't turn on the television. Didn't play music. Just listened to the ticking of the old wall clock and the soft hum of the radiator. He could feel her uncertainty like a weight in the air. Every time she shifted her paw or tilted her ears toward a noise, he felt his own heart twist. She wasn't just scared. She was grieving. Holding on to a goodbye that hadn't finished happening. The scent of cinnamon still lingered faintly in the room, a leftover comfort from nights long past. Walter hadn't planned on lighting that candle tonight, but something told him it helped. A trace of warmth that might remind her of something kind. As the hours slipped by, the snow thickened outside, blanketing the street and washing the world in silence. The old bus stop bench disappeared beneath the growing drifts. From the window, it was as if it had never been there at all. Around 10 o'clock, Walter opened the only can of dog food he still had, left over from a stray he used to feed last winter. He added a little warm water to soften it and placed the bowl gently on the floor, about 4 feet from Maya. She didn't budge. He didn't push. Instead, he stepped back to the recliner and settled in. The flames in the fireplace danced in orange ribbons across the walls, casting soft shadows across the room. It took her nearly 15 minutes. First, her nose twitched. Then, she uncurled just slightly and sniffed the air. Her head rose, ears flicking once. She stood slowly, her legs stiff, paws shaky on the wood floor. Step by step, she moved toward the bowl. She ate in silence. Slow. Careful. Taking small bites, as if she didn't trust the food would still be there if she ate too fast. When she finished, she looked toward Walter, not directly, but close enough. Then she turned, padded softly back across the floor, and, without hesitation, crawled right back into the backpack. Not the blanket. Not the warmth of the fire. The backpack. As if it were still sacred ground. As if it still held the last breath of someone she loved. Walter sat there, the fire crackling beside him, the dog curled inside her nylon shell, and the snow still falling beyond the glass. Neither of them said a word. But both of them, in their own way, were trying to make sense of what it meant to begin again. The routine and the waiting. The next morning came quietly, wrapped in the stillness that only a heavy snowfall can bring. The sun peeked through pale clouds, casting soft light across the living room, but Maya remained in her backpack, head resting on the edge like a guard dog who had fallen asleep on duty. Walter moved about the house like a man adjusting to something unfamiliar. He brewed a fresh pot of coffee, toasted a slice of rye, and opened the window blinds just enough to let the morning in. Then, like clockwork, he took his seat by the fireplace, newspaper in hand, reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He didn't talk to her right away. He just began reading the news aloud, like he used to when his daughter was young. Not dramatic, not forced, just gentle narration about local weather alerts, school closures, and a human interest piece about a farmer who'd rescued a cow stuck in a frozen ditch. Maya listened. She didn't look at him. But her ears twitched at the sound of his voice. Every now and then, she blinked slowly, eyes heavy but alert, as if she wanted to understand the words but couldn't quite remember how. This became their routine. Every morning, Walter read aloud. Every night, he laid out a fresh blanket by the fire. And every day at exactly 3:15 p.m., Maya would make her way to the front window. That window, facing the bus stop. She'd sit perfectly still, her back legs tucked beneath her, eyes focused on that empty corner of the street. She didn't bark. Didn't whine. She simply watched, as if waiting for someone to appear through the snow. Walter noticed it the second day. And the third. By the fourth, he began to mark the time without needing to check the clock. Maya never missed it. No matter where she was, she'd rise, stretch slowly, and walk to that same spot, head tilted just slightly, ears up, body still. And when the time passed, when no one came, she'd slowly return to the backpack and curl back inside like it was a nest made of memory. It broke Walter's heart a little more each day. But he didn't stop her. He understood waiting. He'd done it too, waited for calls that never came, for letters that stayed lost in the mail, for people who never walked back through the door. One day, as she lay curled at the window, he sat beside her, not too close, just near enough for her to know he was there. "I don't know who he was," Walter said softly. "But if he could see you now, he'd know you never gave up on him." Maya didn't move. Didn't blink. But a moment later, she shifted her head slightly, just enough to let it rest against the tip of his boot. No sound. No wag. Just wait. Quiet, deliberate wait. And for Walter, that was the beginning of something real. Not trust. Not yet. But presence. And presence, he knew, was a powerful thing. The search begins. The first hint of purpose came to Walter one evening as he folded Maya's blanket near the fireplace. It had been 2 weeks since she arrived, and while she was still shy, something had changed. She was eating regularly now, sleeping outside the backpack more often, and sometimes, only sometimes, she'd nudge her nose into the crook of his arm when he sat on the floor beside her. But it was the way she watched the bus stop every afternoon that stayed with him. The same stillness, the same expectation. She wasn't waiting out of habit. She was waiting for someone specific. And Walter realized, he had to find out who. The note still lived in his shirt pocket, folded and soft at the edges from being reread. "Her name is Maya. I'm sorry. Please be kind. She's good." It wasn't enough to track down anyone, not on its own. But the handwriting, the emotional tone, it was the writing of a child. And Walter knew this small town well. He'd driven the school bus route for over 20 years. He knew teachers, principals, lunchroom aides, people who might recognize a story if he started asking. So he began with a few quiet phone calls. "Hey, Nancy, it's Walt Green. You still working down at the middle school?" "Hi Walter, yeah, front desk now. Everything okay?" He kept it simple. No big questions. Just, "You ever hear about a kid who lost a dog? Maybe a German Shepherd puppy? Sometime around that big snowstorm a few weeks ago?" Most folks didn't know anything. Some promised to ask around. A few never called back. But he didn't stop. Each time Maya sat by the window, Walter's resolve deepened. He couldn't let her keep hoping for something that might never return, unless he was sure it couldn't. Then, one afternoon, his phone rang. The caller ID said Linda, Pine Ridge Elementary. Walter picked up. "Hi Walter, it's Linda. I think I might have something for you." He stood still in the center of the kitchen, barely breathing. "We had a boy," she said. "His name's Liam Parker. 11 years old. Disappeared right before the snow hit hard. He'd been staying with relatives outside of town. Some stuff went on with his mom, not sure what exactly. But he ran off. Police picked him up a few days later, put him into the foster system." Walter's fingers tightened around the phone. "Did he have a dog?" he asked. A pause. "Yes," Linda said. "A puppy. German Shepherd mix. Said it was the only good thing he had left." Walter turned toward the living room. Maya lay asleep, her nose twitching in her dreams. And in that moment, he knew. The boy hadn't let her go because he wanted to. He let her go because he had to. The breakthrough. Walter hung up the phone and stood motionless in his kitchen, his heart beating louder than the wind tapping against the window panes. Liam. That was the name. 11 years old. A boy torn from his world and forced into someone else's idea of safety. And Maya, his Maya, left behind in the middle of a storm, waiting where he said he'd be back. The idea sat heavy in Walter's chest. He walked into the den where Maya lay curled by the fireplace, her head resting on her paws. She opened her eyes as he entered, blinking up at him with that quiet calm that always seemed wiser than her age. Walter knelt beside her, resting a hand gently on her back. "I think I found him," he whispered. She didn't move. But she didn't look away either. Over the next few days, Walter made call after call, county foster care offices, shelters, school administrators. He didn't have any official authority, but he had patience, and more importantly, he had a story. A story that, when shared with the right people, tugged at just the right threads. Finally, one of those threads led to a voice on the other end of the line saying, "Yes. We know Liam. He was safe, staying with a foster family in a town called Belgrade, just 2 towns west. Quiet kid. Traumatized but stable," they said. He hadn't spoken much during intake, but one thing was consistent. He kept asking about his dog. Walter's throat tightened when he heard that. "I have her," he said quietly. "She's been with me ever since I found her at the bus stop." There was silence on the line. Then the caseworker said something Walter hadn't dared hope for. "We can arrange a supervised visit. No guarantees, but maybe it's what they both need." Walter hung up the phone, feeling the kind of shake in his limbs he hadn't felt since the day his daughter was born. He walked to the den, where Maya sat now by the window, looking out toward the street. Same hour. Same stillness. Her body didn't tense the way it once did, but she was still waiting. He sat down beside her and rested his hand on her back once again. "I think he's okay," he said, voice low, trembling. "And he didn't forget you." Maya didn't blink. Didn't shift. But he felt it, just under his palm, a soft shiver through her body. Not fear. Not sadness. Recognition. The heart knows. Even in silence. And Walter knew, without question, she had heard him. The reunion. Saturday arrived wrapped in frost, the kind of cold that quiets even the wind. The roads were icy, the sky a dull gray blanket, but Walter had been up since dawn. The truck was cleaned off, the heater already humming. A folded blanket sat on the passenger seat, and beside it, Maya rested, alert, ears perked, her body trembling with a kind of stillness that said she knew something was different. She hadn't slept in the backpack last night. Instead, she lay by the door, her nose pointed at the hallway, her eyes following Walter's every step. She ate only half her breakfast, and her gaze kept flicking toward the window, as if sensing the shift in the air, in his routine, in the quiet anticipation that filled the house. Walter reached over now, resting a gloved hand gently on her back. "You ready, girl?" Maya didn't wag her tail. She didn't need to. The way she sat straighter, lifted her chin just slightly, was answer enough. The drive to Belgrade took 40 minutes, but to Walter, it passed like a heartbeat and a lifetime all at once. Maya sat in silence, watching the trees blur past the window, her body still as stone, but her eyes never stopping. When they turned down the quiet neighborhood street, Walter saw a woman standing out front in a red coat, hands tucked into her sleeves. She waved him in. Her name was Erin, the foster care caseworker. Her breath fogged in the air as she approached the driver's side window. "He's inside," she said with a soft smile. "He hasn't said a word all morning. Just keep sitting by the door." Walter nodded. His voice caught in his throat. He opened the door and Maya jumped down on her own. No leash. No hesitation. She looked at the house, then at Walter, and he whispered, "Go ahead, girl. He's in there." She walked. Not fast. Not anxious. Each step careful, deliberate, as if she were following a scent no one else could see. Erin opened the door, stepping aside. And then, there he was. Liam. 11 years old, thin frame wrapped in an oversized hoodie, freckles dusting his cheeks, hands trembling at his sides. His eyes locked on hers the moment she stepped through the doorway. "Maya," he breathed. Her body froze. Then something in her broke open. She launched across the floor, paws thudding softly on the rug, and Liam dropped to his knees just in time to catch her. She didn't bark. Didn't whine. Just buried herself into his chest, her body pressed against him like she wanted to disappear into his skin. Liam's arms wrapped around her, shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over. "I didn't want to. I had to. I told you I'd come back." Maya didn't move, didn't pull away. She just let herself be held. Walter stood at the doorway, silent, watching the two of them fold into each other like pages of the same book. No words could have described the weight of it. The quietness of it. The power in a reunion that had waded through snow and silence and time. He saw Liam's face buried in Maya's fur, and he realized, for the first time, what Maya had been carrying. Not just memory. But belief. The kind children hold like gospel and dogs never let go of. Walter stepped into the room, sitting gently on the edge of the couch as Maya curled at Liam's feet. The boy's hands never stopped moving, stroking behind her ears, trailing down her side, pausing only to wipe his tears before starting again. They stayed like that for a long time. Erin brought in tea and didn't say much. Just watched. The ache in her expression was soft, knowing. She talked in her sleep, Walter said quietly. Erin looked over. "Dogs dream," she replied. "Yeah." But Maya never made a sound. Not once. Not until I told her he was okay. Liam glanced up, his eyes wide and glassy. Did she wait the whole time? Walter didn't lie. She sat at that bus stop every afternoon. Same bench. Same direction. Even when the buses stopped running. Even when the snow came so hard you couldn't see the street. Liam's shoulders shook. "I left her because I thought it'd be safer. They said we had to leave right then. My uncle was coming back. I couldn't bring her. I didn't want them to take her too." Maya shifted in his lap, pressing her head against his ribs. "You did the best you could," Walter said softly. "And she knew. She never stopped believing you'd find her again." And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them all, like time paused to let them breathe. A boy. A dog. And the space between them finally filled. That day didn't end with answers. There were still questions about what came next. But in that quiet room, with the fire crackling low and Maya fast asleep with her head on Liam's knee, Walter understood something deeply. Some reunions aren't loud. They're soft. Sacred. And they arrive not in thunder, but in trust. The choice, to stay or let go. The sun had already dipped behind the trees when Walter finally pulled into his driveway. The truck's tires crunched against the snow-packed gravel, and the headlights carved pale paths through the dark. Maya sat beside him in the passenger seat, wrapped in the same wool blanket that had warmed her since that first ride home. But this time, she wasn't trembling. She wasn't staring out the window. She was quiet. Still. But not afraid. Walter parked the truck and didn't move for a long while. His hand rested on the gearshift, his eyes watching the slow rise and fall of Maya's breath. She hadn't curled into the backpack that day. She hadn't looked toward the bus stop. She had rested her head on Liam's lap and stayed there, calm as a candle flame. And that's what scared Walter. He stepped out and opened her door. She hopped down, trotted to the porch, and waited. No leash, no glance back. She knew this place now. It had become part of her story. But Walter could feel it, the change. Something had shifted between her and the boy. Not in the way that meant goodbye, but in the way that said something unfinished had been answered. Later that night, while Maya lay curled by the fireplace, Walter sat at the kitchen table, the note spread out before him once again. Her name is Maya. I'm sorry. Please be kind. She's good. He'd read it dozens of times. But tonight, it felt like something sacred. Like a contract between souls. What if they didn't let her see him again? What if the adoption went through and Liam's new life didn't include her? What would Maya do, wait at the window forever? Walter stood and walked into the living room. Maya lifted her head as he knelt beside her. If they don't let you see him, he said gently, his voice barely above a whisper, you'll stay with me. No matter what. You hear me? She didn't blink. Didn't shift. She leaned forward, slow, careful, and rested her head against his chest. The weight of her trust settled into his arms like something warm and holy. And in that silence, he understood the truth. Maya didn't need to choose between them. She wasn't replacing Liam by staying. She was honoring him. Because sometimes love doesn't end. It just grows in new directions. Like branches from the same root. Maya had already chosen once, when she waited at that bus stop, day after day, heart full of faith. Now it was Walter's turn. To choose her. To keep her safe. To be the next chapter in a story that had nearly ended in the snow. He wrapped the blanket around her tighter, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "You're home now, Maya. And I'm not going anywhere." Weeks passed like the snow melting quietly from rooftops, slow, unannounced, but undeniable. Maya settled into her new life, not all at once, but in subtle, beautiful ways. She no longer flinched at the sound of the door opening. She didn't guard the backpack anymore. Instead, she slept beside the fireplace or followed Walter into the kitchen, tail swaying in gentle arcs, eyes soft and steady. She still visited the window at 3:15 p.m. Not every day. Just some. And when she did, she sat peacefully, not waiting like before, but remembering. Walter kept Liam's note in a small wooden frame on the mantel. Right next to it sat a photo he'd taken that last weekend, a snapshot of Liam and Maya in the backyard. Snowflakes falling around them, Maya's ears tilted forward, Liam's hand resting lightly on her collar. Neither of them looked at the camera. They only looked at each other. Whole. Present. Still part of the same world. Walter sometimes found himself standing there in the quiet of the evening, hand resting on the frame, heart both heavy and full. He still expected to hear Maya's paws padding softly down the hallway some nights. Still glanced at the window without meaning to. But the house no longer felt empty. Because Maya had left something behind. Not just her fur on the rug or her favorite blanket curled beside the couch. She'd left a lesson. That love, true, patient love, doesn't disappear in the silence. It waits. Even when the world forgets you. Even when the snow comes and the bus never does. It waits. And sometimes, it comes back. Not to stay forever. But just long enough to whisper. I still see you. I still remember. I'm still yours. Maya's story is more than just a tale of a lost puppy and a boy who loved her. It's a reminder of the quiet strength found in waiting, and the healing that comes from not giving up on love. In life, we all face moments where we feel abandoned, uncertain, or forgotten. But sometimes, the heart that waits, with hope, with patience, and with faith, is the one that leads us back to where we're meant to be. Whether you're a child forced to grow up too soon, or an old man discovering new purpose, connection often finds us in the most unexpected ways. So maybe today, take a moment to look around. Who's waiting for you? Who have you promised, intentionally or not, to come back to? And are you ready to be that person again? Here on Paw Prints and Stories, we believe in the extraordinary bond between animals and people, the kind that survives distance, silence, and time. If Maya and Liam's story moved you, consider joining our community. Subscribe to Paw Prints and Stories and become part of a space where love always finds its way home. And now, the decision is yours. Will you be the one worth waiting for? Or the one who chooses to return?